population of the Chicago area expanded rapidly during the 19th century. 1803 was the year of the first American settlement here with the establishment of Fort Dearborn. And then 1833, this town of Chicago was incorporated. In 1837, Chicago was incorporated as a city, which was a much larger area than just the town. The city of Chicago was incorporated with about 4,000 inhabitants. Now, the very few inhabitants of Fort Dearborn to 4,000 inhabitants over the 30 years at the very beginning of the 19th century is a pretty normal population expansion for this time and for this area. However, the following set of 30 years, from the 1830s to the 1860s, that population would boom from 4,000 to over 110,000 in the 1860s. Now, this is a huge population explosion in an area that did not really have the resources to deal with the needs and desires of this amount of people. And so this is where we really get into some of the problems with the waterways and how they were being used and abused during the 19th century. The beginning of the 19th century is really when people started effecting changes to Chicago's waterways in a major and permanent way. Some of the first of these were simply to dredge out what was a very shallow and narrow river to eliminate some of the sandbars that separated the land from the lake and to kind of make all of these waterways more navigable for boats. But then one of the other really big projects that people were trying to do was to connect the Great Lakes to the Mississippi River. These were the two major shipping waterways in the region, and it would be really helpful if people could ship goods between one and the other. The first waterway project to connect the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River was the Illinois and Michigan Canal, which was dug between 1836 and 1848. Now, this was not the most efficient mode of travel. It was comprised of locks that each had a lock tender that boats would have to go through one by one. So it took kind of a long time. It was not very efficient, but it was extremely important in terms of actually connecting the Great Lakes to the Mississippi.
So in the first few decades of the 19th century, the United States was very interested in what today we would call public works projects. This, again, idea of trying to alter physical geography to suit the wants and needs of this new society. And the first of these that really kicks off is the Erie Canal. But shortly thereafter, you lead to the beginning of the Illinois and Michigan Canal. And the I&M Canal, as we know it, starts work in 1836. 1836 to 1848, for 12 years, this canal is dug, it's excavated. It's the early years of the Industrial Revolution. So there are no steam shovels, there are no dynamite. It has to be dug by hand. This requires massive amounts of cheap manual labor. They found very early on that it was far cheaper, rather than recruit Americans from the East Coast, they could bring poor, starving, and desperate Irishmen at the height of the Irish potato famine to come over and work on this canal. And this forms the backbone of the first major migrant wave into Chicago. Many famous Irish neighborhoods, such as Bridgeport, were founded by these workers who came over to dig the I&M Canal. And this was arduous, back-breaking labor. They're working primarily in the summer months because the ground is too frozen in the winter. During that time, they're working in stagnant or swamp water. It is very hot. It is very hard work. And if they drank the water, likely they would get dysentery, which would make their position far worse. Cholera, epidemics rage through on a regular basis. Regardless, even despite losing funds for 6 years, which delayed work, the canal was finished within 12-year span from 1836 to 1848. And by 1848, when the canal finally opens, it changes traffic in what we know as the West. Now, because of the Erie Canal in the east, it was easy to get from New York to the eastern edge of the Great Lakes. From that Great Lake port of Erie, you could take a ship and sail to Chicago far easier than you could travel over land, this being before railroads. And once you arrived in Chicago, you could then hop on a packet boat, a passenger boat, to go down the canal, and you could be at the Mississippi River within 24 hours. Many of the settlers that would populate what we know as Iowa and Nebraska and Kansas all came through Chicago through this route. Likewise, the lumber and the resources used to build those early settlements came through here. All the timber from Michigan and from the Upper Peninsula in Wisconsin is brought down to Chicago. It is a bastion of the timber industry. That, you could argue, is what built early Chicago, is the lumber trade. And then all that is being shipped down the canals. And the way this worked is the ships would sail out of Lake Michigan up the Chicago River, which was the port at the time, through however many bridges, and they would dock wherever their spot was. And the river was lined with these wharves, docks, warehouses, grain silos, and piers. And these ships would dock 1, 2, and 3 deep, and they would offload their goods, and then those goods would be reloaded onto specific sized canal boats. They could be sent down through the locks all the way to the Mississippi. The Illinois-Michigan Canal is what truly helps make Chicago what it is today. And that the growth of going from 400 people to 100,000 in less than 20 years and 1 million in about 40 years is all based off of that trade. In 1880, the city of Chicago, the port of Chicago, outpaces the ports of New York and San Francisco combined in terms of shipping. And all that is between Lake Michigan and the Illinois-Michigan Canal.